Hi everybody, welcome back to part 26 of the Trumpeter 1/200 scale Bismarck build. In this episode I've been focusing on getting the upper part of the bridge fitted to the model. That's an assembly that's been put together over 2 or 3 episodes. It's quite a complex structure with lots of photo etch on it. So I wanted to get it fitted to the model. It's much safer on the ship rather than lying around on the bench. But at this stage, when you're fitting the upper bridge, one thing you've got to think about is how to handle the foremast, and that's because the foremast attaches directly onto the back of the upper bridge, and you connect it to the bridge by a few supports and struts, so they're quite complicated to put together. And because of that complexity, I decided to build the foremast and fit it to the upper part of the bridge before applying it to the model. You could go an alternative route by fitting the bridge and then trying to assemble the mast onto the bridge whilst it's in situ, but I thought that was a bit too difficult, and because of the complexity and fragility of the upper bridge with all the photo etch, I thought that just run quite a big risk of damaging it. So I'll be starting the video this week by putting the mast together. It's quite a complex structure, and for those of you that are building the kit yourself with the Pontos set, you'll know that the Pontos instructions are pretty vague about how the part goes together. So what I'll be doing during the video is to give you some close-up photographs of my assembly, so hopefully they'll be a bit more clear than the Pontos instructions and will help you if you're trying the Pontos set yourself. So we'll start off by getting all the Pontos brass out that we need for the foremast. The set completely replaces all the Trumpeter plastic, so let's make a start. We'll get over to the bench. Okay, let's make a start this week then. So this is the upper part of the bridge that I'm going to be dealing with in this episode. It's nearly done, we've just got a few more details to fit to it. But the main job for this week is to sort out the foremast, and that's because the foremast attaches to a walkway that comes out of the back of this platform here and fixes onto this upper platform here at the back. But it's attached to the superstructure at the sides with lots of very fine photo etch struts and supports. And I think it'll be too difficult to fit those once this whole assembly's on the main ship. So I'm going to deal with all that today. The first thing I want to do is to put the foremast together. This is here in the Pontos instructions, these stages. So there's quite a few parts to it. The brass completely replaces all the Trumpeter plastic parts. And hopefully you can see here at the bottom how the mast fits onto the back of the upper bridge. So I'll get the parts out for the mast and we'll put that together first. That'll give us an idea about how it attaches to the upper part of the bridge. Okay, so as ever the Pontos instructions are pretty indecipherable really. But one thing I have found from experience of trying to put together Pontos kits is sometimes you just need to make a start and locate parts where it can only go in one place, and that sometimes gives you a visual clue to how the rest of the assembly goes together. It's not ideal. I wish Pontos would improve their instructions into more of a step-by-step approach, but we've got to live with what we've got. So let's make a start, see if we can make sense of how this goes together. The other thing I've learned from experience is to start at the bottom of the mast, because Pontos provide these as pieces with steps in them, and they're designed to locate these rings at the correct height. So they're very finely machined, and these will only fit in one place, so that goes down to the stop. But obviously you've got to work sequentially up the mast, otherwise you're going to lock yourself out. These are the yard brackets. So this is the lower yard. Now the thing with fitting yards in these Pontos sets is to just be aware if they've got lifts with them. That's what this photo etch piece is here. And that's because you can't get the lift to fit if the yard is in its proper position on the mast. The geometry just doesn't allow you to hook the ends of the lift around the mast because of the stops on the mast itself. So what you have to do is get the lifts attached as you're sliding the yard down the mast. The easiest way is just to try and get one end of the lift on, and before we do any more, just secure that with a drop of CA. And then with the yard still well up the mast, we can then bring the other side of the lift onto the other end of the yard, like that. Secure that end as well. And at that point, you can drop the yard down to its correct position. And then with everything in place, some extra thin CA will just secure the yard in position. There's another yard right at the top of the mast, but we don't have any lifts on this one. This ladder goes all the way up the forward edge of the foremast. You'd need quite a head for heights, I think, to get to the top of this. So that's the basic mast assembly. Now I want to sort out all the pieces for the stays that go up onto the superstructure. Now with these struts, we have to fit an attachment because basically we have one strut that goes in that sort of position and another one in that sort of position. And to attach it to this main strut, we have a little ring or a bracket. And it's not particularly clear in the Pontos instructions but what we have to do is cut the bracket. So that's this minuscule piece here, and it has to be folded through 180 degrees, so back on itself, and that creates a little pin which pushes into the end of the strut, because the strut's hollow, it's drilled out or it's turned out. So that just goes in like that. As I said, it's not at all apparent in the Pontos instructions that that's what you have to do. Well, actually, these are so small that I'll need to get some photographs just to show you how they go together. The camera won't pick this up. I was at the optician's last week, and I had to smile to myself when he asked, did I do any close work? And I couldn't quite explain that, yes, I did. I was working with some little bits of brass round about 0.5 millimetre across. I'll get some photographs of that assembly. It's a bit too small to see on the video camera. Okay, that's the mast more or less complete. The next thing I want to do is to build the platform which fits here, and it basically bridges over between this platform here and the funnel. And if I put that together, it might just help us to determine exactly how all these struts connect onto the forward bridge superstructure. Okay, so that's the foremast made as per the Pontos instructions. And this is what it looks like in close-up, just so that if you're building this yourself you can see in a bit more detail than you can see in the Pontos instructions. The interesting thing that slightly threw me was that the yards are actually on the aft side of the mast, which doesn't feel right, but that's how it was. And I was querying the Pontos instructions for a moment, but no, it's correct in that configuration. So the way I think I'm going to put these together is to attach the stays just at the bottom here, and then I'll be able to adjust the top brackets which fit onto the superstructure once I've got the mast in position, hopefully. Okay, so that's the foremast built in accordance with the Pontos instructions. So hopefully that will fit together. So I'm going to leave the mast to one side for a moment until I finish off one or two final details on this upper bridge structure. The first thing I'm going to do is fit this ladder which joins the searchlight platform to the one above. And I've also got some signalman's platforms which go here. Now I missed those in the Pontos set, I couldn't see them. And I went ahead in one of the early episodes and made a platform from styrene. Then later on I found that Pontos do actually provide some photo etch platforms, so I'll fit those now. Okay, so let's get these painted and then we can see if we can get them fitted onto the bridge. Okay, after quite a bit of going backwards and forwards with this upper bridge, it's ready to fit the mast now. I say backwards and forwards because as I've been adding those last few bits and pieces, I've been knocking others off and having to repair them. So, as I said, it's taken quite a while to get to this stage, but it's where I want it to be now. So let's get the platform fitted. This should be quite a good location. There's a tab on the photo etch that should drop into the recess in the Trumpeter plastic part. So that's quite a strong join using that tab, which is just as well because this brass mast has a bit of weight to it, so the platform needs to support that. What I'm going to do now off camera is just go over to the ship and make sure that this bridge and this platform here fits correctly onto the funnel. Okay, so I've checked that and it is a perfect fit on the ship, which is just as well. It could have been all sorts of problems ahead if it hadn't have done. So I'm pleased about that. Let's get the mast on now. These tiny photo etch brackets are to locate the braces. Okay, so I'll get a photograph of this strut assembly, and hopefully it'll help you decipher the Pontos instructions, being able to see it as built, if you like. The photographs in the Pontos instructions are far too small, so I'll get some nice close-ups and you can see how those struts go together. Okay, so get this bridge on now. Okay, so I think you could tell from that last sequence that I was struggling to get the bridge and this bridging piece to fit properly. And what was happening was that despite the test fit, when I came to apply the glue and try and do it again for real, it appeared that the bridging piece was too long, so it was pushing the upper part of the bridge forward and preventing it seating properly onto the deck below. So what I had to do very quickly off camera, I didn't have time to adjust all the cameras in the shed to film it, but I cut the Pontos bridging piece and took about 1mm out of it, and that was enough to enable all those parts, the bridge, the bridging piece and the funnel, to sit properly together. And also what I had to do was to get a piece of Trumpeter photo etch. They provide some perforated plating for some of the other platforms on the ship, and I used that to cover up the cut mark that I'd made in the platform. So it's not perfect, but I've got out of a bit of a hole there, I think. And one thing that I've learned about building these large scale ship kits, particularly with a structure like this upper bridge with lots of photo etch on it, we've got the turn brass booms which are protruding from it, and there's all sorts of things that can get knocked off. And what happens is that the more you fiddle around with them, the more risk you run of knocking something else off, and the problem then kind of snowballs. You're constantly in a sequence of knocking things off, fixing them, touching them up, and eventually the whole result looks worse than when you started out. So one big thing to learn when you're building something like this is to know when to stop and accept that it's as good as you're going to get it. And that's a case in point with this bridging piece. It's not as perfect as I would have liked, but the other thing that happens with these large-scale ship kits is that when they're finished, the eye just gets an overall sense of the detail of it, and it's very difficult to focus in on one particular little glitch or error. And I know that in a couple of weeks' time I'll have forgotten about that and I won't even be looking at it anymore. So it's very easy to obsess really about trying to get everything absolutely perfect. And in doing so, what you often do is make the situation an awful lot worse. So it's a good skill to know when to call time on something. But even so, I'm going to be doing something a little bit more simple in the next episode. I'm going to be building the secondary armament. There's not a lot to do with them. There's very little photo etch, so I'm giving myself a bit of a break from photo etch this week after all the work that I've done on this upper bridge. So hopefully it'll move things on a little bit, and that'll be coming up in part 27, usual time, next Friday at 8 o'clock. So hopefully I'll see you then, everybody. In the meantime, look after yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.